Hi there, my name is Nicole Hebert with the Moose Show Journey to Hope team, and this is Voices of
No,
Hope.
I'm just kidding. Hi, my name is Joe Wedge. I'm with Obscured Poetry. We grew up really poor. I don't remember living any place more than 6 months until I became a teenager, back and forth, different sides of the state. And I remember moving around so much. I remember being very, very young and thinking, I don't want my kids to grow up this way. So I've always been a fairly driven guy. When I got into high school, I met a guy who kind of launched my creative side. And so I ended up going to college for music. And when I went to college for music. Like I didn't go in trying to get a degree. I went in trying to learn music. I was a musician for years and years and years. And then about 6 years ago, and as a musician, I should backtrack just a little. As a musician, all of my content was really about love, like typically relationship-based love, romantic love, but I was always fascinated with love as a general rule. So 5 years ago, life got pretty challenging mentally. Just a lot of stuff hit me at the exact same time, and it put me in a place that I wasn't prepared for. And of course, that led to some depression and some anxiety. And I say some, like I was diagnosed; it was severe. And at the same time, I was working pretty heavy. I was doing 14-hour days, 7-day work weeks. We were incredibly understaffed, and I went to recruit this guy to come work for me. He hosted an open mic night, and so I went there trying to schmooze him and recruit him, and he called me on stage completely unexpectedly. So I jumped on stage and I read the lyrics to one of my songs that I had written previously. Had a decent response, never got to recruit the guy that night. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go back next week and I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to get this guy. And of course, you can't really schmooze somebody unless you're prepared. So I actually wrote a poem. He called me up on stage unexpectedly again. I read the poem and it had like this really kind of crazy impact. So through this really weird series of events, I got into poetry, and it was right at the same time as life was kind of really testing me. And I've always been a big believer that, diamonds are created with pressure, and there is a balance to the pain and discomfort, the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. You get to the highest peak of the mountain, and all of a sudden the view changes and there's another peak for you to climb. So within this depression and this anxiety that I was going through, I was also finding my way in poetry. And when the two came together, it really allowed me to find this balance between that. The depression poems that I have, they're specific, and they're very true to the darkness, the weight that you feel when you are depressed and you have that anxiety kicking in, where it feels like you're just swimming in an ocean, wrapped up in a wet blanket, trying to swim your way out. It's just so heavy. And through the poetry in particular, it allowed me to see the light at the end of the tunnel, to see the stars in the darkness. And with those, I hope that message comes across pretty purely, because I think it's important. I think when you're in that mental state, it's very easy to just see the darkness, right? But if you can take a second and you can breathe and you can remember kind of where you are in this world, all of a sudden you do get to see the stars in the darkness. And there's a real beauty in that. So for me, poetry really was my saving grace through all of that. If you had told me 10 years ago I was going to be a poet, I would have kind of laughed in your face. I would have never expected to go down this road, but life has a funny way of taking you in its own direction. The way that we did growing up poor and really kind of in a, I'm not going to say unstable life, but definitely unconventional. It really made me a strong kid, especially, when I got into my early 20s. I wasn't afraid of anything because I'd kind of already been through it all. When I got older in particular, that's when things became a bit tough. As I got older, I always can, I think most people who know me, most people who've talked to me, they'll tell you I'm a pretty positive guy most of the time. And especially in my 20s and early 30s, it wasn't a challenge to be positive. Like for me, that was, I'm not in the gutter growing up the way I used to. So things are great. I have friends and a life, and I'm working. And, but then when I did get hit with depression and anxiety, it was a bit of a wake-up call, and not in the way that it was that I didn't have compassion for other people, but when your perspective changes on things, the things that you look at change, right? Someone said that once, and it really kind of hit home with that. I don't think that I could be writing the content that I'm writing now without having gone through that. There is something to be said about building those muscles and actually having to do the work comparative to just observing it. All of that being said, I think it's definitely strengthened my resolve, especially when it comes to that life balance and that pro con. I mentioned earlier the diamonds being made with pressure. Going through my own mental health issues that I have gone through, and at times are still going through. One of the reminders that I use, and I look back at my life because of that, is that, look, pressure's never comfortable, right? But you don't get to the other side of greatness without being uncomfortable. You don't get to the light at the end of the tunnel without going through the tunnel. And it's not easy. It's not fun most of the time. It can be downright exhausting, but almost every single time, if you can get to that light at the end of the tunnel, it's worth it. It's funny because when I grew up, and I'm at that point in my age where I get to say that now. When I grew up, mental health really wasn't a concept, right? And before me, even more so, our grandparents and great grandparents, the stuff that they went through, from a perspective standpoint was much more life-threatening and survival-based than we really have to deal with now. But mental health really wasn't a concept for them. I think as we've gotten to a world where anxiety and depression and mental health in general is becoming more understood, I think we're coming to a point where we start to realize that there was a time where it actually separated us. If you had a mental health issue, you were kind of stigmatized, and now I think we're getting to a point where it's actually kind of connecting us, because it seems like the majority of us out in the world, we feel, or we can feel, alone, and sometimes all you need to know is that you're not alone. And it's been amazing to me as I've met more and more people through this journey, how not alone we are. It's amazing how many people struggle and deal with this and survive this every day. If I could give a message, that's what it would be, is you're stronger than you know. And there's a lot of us out there. There's a lot of us out there to be there, to listen, to help support, to remind you that, as heavy as life can feel, tomorrow's a new day, and there's other people to help you carry that weight. Been a big fan of Mr. Rogers, which I know sounds a little silly, but he's genuinely one of my idols. He tells the story of his mom and how he asked his mom one time about all of the war and the violence and the hatred, because of course he grew up through Vietnam and stuff like that. And his mom said, for every instance that you see somebody hurting another person, or you see an issue of violence or anger, she said, look around, really take a second and look, because for every instance of that you see, you're going to see 10 more where people are helping each other, where people are helping to build instead of destroy. And those words have always kind of stuck with me. Like I hear those words in my head when I start feeling like life is too much. And it's a reminder to me to take a second and look. One of the things I mentioned earlier was when you're in that depressive and anxious state, it really hyper focuses you. You get stuck in kind of that bubble of the situation that's causing that trigger. And for me, that phrase, look around for the good, it really has helped. And so that's what I do when I'm in that depressive state. I built a habit now from hearing that so many times, that I literally hear that voice in my head saying, look around. And I do. And I'll tell you, I'm 41 years on this planet now. I've been using that trick for about 20 years. There's never a time I haven't seen the help. I haven't seen the love. I haven't seen the compassion. But the trick is, and it's really, really important, you have to look. You have to make that choice to see the good that's around you. The light at the end of the tunnel of depression and anxiety is gratitude. And you hear that a lot, and it sounds a little cliche, and I definitely can relate to that to some point. But as cliche as it sounds, the reality, the truth of it, that's what it is, right? I mean, when you can take a step back and realize that it is as important and urgent and life impacting as that weight feels on you, it's one piece of a very, very big truth. And when you can see that it is maybe not the ocean that you're swimming in, but a lake, and there is a shore not too far away, right? That can really make a big, big difference. Obscure poetry has been kind of my passion project. I think that at some point when I finally let this go, it's going to be my legacy. It started out with me trying to recruit somebody, and ended up with a project that every day gets bigger and bigger, and every time I accomplish one thing, there becomes 10 more things that I need to do now. But I created Obscure Poetry with the intent goal of bringing people together. We talk about mental health, we talk about anxiety, depression, and so much of that is caused, or at least triggered, by divisiveness, right? Everything that you see in the world, especially in today's world with the coronavirus and politics and just kind of the state of the world that we're in, there's so much divisiveness. I mean, you hear that on the news, you hear that on social media, but people even use that to divide people. Their statements are, oh, look at those liberals, or those conservatives, or those this, or those that. It's never we or us. So one of the things that I really wanted to do when I started this project was make sure that it was responsible, make sure that it was focused, honest, and inclusive. The only way for two divisive sides to come together is for them to focus on their similarities, right? The reason they're divisive is because everybody's focusing on their differences. And with obscured, I really wanted to take a middle ground. I mean, obscured by definition means not easily understood or just out of plain sight. And everything that we talk about on the website follows within that. Everything that we do within the one-by-one media things that we do, the images, you'll actually see that the word obscured is blurred out to kind of fit with that message. You'll see, if you look into kind of second and third degree layers, like the more you look at our imagery, the more you'll find. And the reason is, I think that's kind of like all of the divisive topics that we have. The more that you look into them, all of a sudden, the more you realize we're not so different. No matter what side of the aisle you're on in any given topic, we do have differences. We're going to, men, women, conservative, liberal, black, white, like no matter how you look at it, there are differences, but we meet in the middle. So all of the topics and the conversations that we have with obscurity, you'll find a very, very middle ground. There's a gun poem, and the gun poem isn't we need guns or we need to ban guns. It's there's an answer in the middle. Let's come together and find the solution where we're all happy. It may take time, but we can do this. I have a poem about religion. I grew up in a very, very religious family, very right-wing Christian, Catholic. And my mom was amazing because she always told me that the truth won't change. The truth will always be the truth. No matter what perspective you see it from, the truth is the truth. And so she encouraged me to study. And so my poem on religion isn't really about whether or not religion is good or bad. It's only what's divisive and what's not. It's what brings us together, right? The points that we can all agree on. And I think especially in the world of high politics and quarantine, where we're literally not social. We're separate by pure definition of the scenario that we live in. We need to find ways to come together, and conceptually in particular, one of the you see social media, Facebook memes and stuff like that, and occasionally these gems come along, and one of them says, let me never make the grave mistake of thinking that because somebody disagrees with me that they're confronting or attacking. And I think that's incredibly, incredibly important. We can have a difference of opinion. We can see different sides of the same building and understand that while they're different perspectives, they're all parts of the truth. And it's only when we bring all of these pieces together that we see the whole truth. And the whole truth, that's where the magic happens. That's where we can make real movement on these things. When we get so focused on the differences in perspective, I think we get hyper-focused and we miss that big truth. So my goal with Obscured is to be very, very inclusive. It's to bring people together, to bring artists together. I think as artists, especially when it comes to mental health, we by nature have a very close tie to that, right? As artists, as creators, we automatically see the world in a different way than our peers. We're kind of the exception, because we're not just seeing the world that way, but we're venturing out into the world that way. And by nature, that leaves us a bit alone, because not everybody can see the world the way that we see it. So I really wanted to make sure that everything that we did was inclusive. It was reciprocal. My goal is that by the time I'm dead, Obscured still lives on. Like this, it's not really about me. It's about the message. It's about inclusivity. It's about growth. It's about coming together and finding those middle grounds. So everything that we've done we have a poem about guns. There's at the end of the poem Without Guns, the reason I wrote that poem was because we were having all of those school shootings consistently. And like I said, it's a very middle ground poem, but it does point out inconsistencies on kind of both sides, and then brings it together at the end. And at the very, very end of it, there's places where you can donate to victims of gun violence. We have some domestic violence poems that will be coming down the line, and those we will have donation aspects that go to victims of domestic violence. So a big part of Obscured is philanthropy and giving back. I do hope to make a living off of this someday. Like I'm working to start a tour and publish a book, maybe two. We've got enough content now for two, but ultimately, like if I die and I don't see a huge profit on it, as long as it's made a positive impact in the world, I've succeeded. Again, I do hope, it takes a lot of work to do this. I'm going on 4 years that I've been building this project. So I definitely hope to build a bit of a network. We're looking for animators and graphic designers and social media marketers and stuff like that to help kind of push this along. But ultimately, the project is a big, big piece of my soul. And I do hope that the words and the messages that we're delivering, I hope they can be connected with. I hope that people can see them, the depression poems that we have, they can see them and connect with that weight, that heaviness, and they can also connect with the light. And I don't want to say solution, because that's the wrong word. It's depression, anxiety. It's not a problem, right? It's a feeling. It's an emotion, and it's there for a reason. There is a lot of pain in the world. There is a lot of hurt. There's a lot of challenge, but we can get through it. There's always been a lot of pain and hurt in the world, and unfortunately, that's just the truth. But we have things now that we never had before. We have options and answers and support like we've never had. We have groups like Voices of Hope there who are genuinely trying to make a positive impact. And that's exactly what Obscured is trying to do. It's trying to make a positive impact in the world. And I think if I had one message to give, it would be this. I can't tell you it's not going to be hard. I can't tell you it's not going to be easy. And I can't even tell you that there won't be times where it doesn't hurt. It will. What I can tell you is you're not alone. And you're stronger and more loved than you know. And if you ever doubt that, come send me a message on obscurepoetry.com. Let's have a conversation.